Hello and welcome. I'm Shalene from Cornerstone, and I'm here with Rachel Carrott from Adopt South and Vicky Pike from Adoption East Midlands to discuss the impact our VR programme has had on their services.
In terms of the feedback, what we've been doing is we've been collecting feedback from our families who have been going through our training up until the point that they get to approval panel. There's a couple of questions that we ask them. So firstly, we ask them around the VR experience, whether they felt that that's given them a deeper understanding of the child's perspective. And the way that we measure this is we use a scaling system of 1 to 5 scale, with 1 being that it's not been helpful at all, 5 being it's been completely helpful. And we've actually averaged out a score of 4.6. So we're very much at that top end where people are feeling like this is really putting them in the child's shoes, that this is kind of really growing their learning and their development. The second question that we've been asking our prospective adopters around is whether the VR, again, has helped them to consider alternative ways to respond and make decisions in terms of their parenting. We're looking at, in our training, our therapeutic responses, we're looking at trauma, we're looking at all of these different elements, and the VR is a massive part of that tool. And we ended up with the exact same score again, where we were seeing it basically mirrored that people were giving us the same for the child's perspective, but in terms of us learning here is helping us in terms of growing our responses here. So again, we got feedback which averages out at 4.6 out of 5. So it's significant where people are saying consistently that actually having this experience is growing our understanding and is going to impact our parenting in the future. We've got some kind of written feedback as well in terms of that qualitative feedback. So we also ask our prospective adopters how they feel watching the VR in stage 1. Has it been helpful to do it again in stage 2, seeing it through these different lenses? And people, I've just got a few quotes here. I think it was extremely useful rewatching the clips as we now have a greater understanding of the situations and actually how we would have that pace approach to parenting. Equally, sort of learning about how the child has been affected from trauma. It was helpful to go into more depth and have those kind of explanations together. It was really helpful to have that perspective now as we can see the trigger behaviors and techniques that we can use to kind of respond to these. Although we saw a lot of the same clips as we watched in stage 1, it was great to revisit these a second time, as I found I was able to pick up more because of my knowledge and understanding around trauma, how the brain works, and therapeutic parenting. It was hard to watch some of the videos, but actually these will stick with me and help me understand more from a child's perspective. It made the experience of the child very real. This was very powerful and has helped me to have a deeper understanding of what abuse and trauma may have been experienced by a child and how this might impact on their behaviours. So generally, the qualitative feedback and the quantitative feedback that we're getting is that this is a really effective tool.
In our adoption support work, we see that again to the next level. So our families might have seen, some of them might have, but people who have perhaps adopted 10 years ago and are looking at this for the first time might have forgotten all their pre-approval training. So they're sort of revisiting that early thinking that they had when they were in approval, you know, that stuff that you're talking about, Kaz, and then sort of having that revisiting scenario going on in their minds where they've actually now got a child that they can attach it all to. And I think a lot of people who do go off and parent and perhaps have adopted quite a while ago where they weren't necessarily given lots and lots of messages about therapeutic parenting or the brain or about developmental trauma and have maybe gone off and just parented, you know, in a very general sense, and been successful quite a while up to a point, and now they've come for support. So I think what the VR can do is just connect with adopters in their own lives and experiences with their child, and it can bring them back into that journey about why did I choose this child for us, and to just rethink about that and what was it that drew us to our child in the first place, and just sort of revisit some of that early matching experience and think about the early bonding that they had and their thinking around this child that came into their home and what they were expecting, what they were feeling. And I think in the adoption support work that we've done using the VR, that's really come out as being incredibly valuable. One family I worked with, I went in to work with them because we had 2 parents who were parenting really differently, and they were parenting 2 very complex children. And some of the problems were about the complexity of the children, but some of the problems were about their different approaches. And what the VR was able to do was to reposition their parenting to align them somewhere together in a new place. So not going with one or going with the other, actually both moved into a new position. And literally their feedback was like overnight, their whole perspective changed.
Yep.
And even that evening, they were already talking about, I can see now I got this wrong when I did this. I can see I did this bit wrong. And it just opened up conversations between this couple, which just really enhanced their own personal relationship as well as their relationship with their children. And it opened up conversation about how tricky their matching journey was. It was actually quite stressful for them, and they probably weren't given enough information about their children. They recognised that they absolutely hadn't taken on board the impact of some of the experiences of their children, and it now completely came into focus for them. That lens just brings children's experiences into focus, doesn't it? And Kaz, your families will have that opportunity when their child comes into placement to revisit it again, won't they?
Absolutely. It's been interesting because we've used it for quite a while. We've had families have come back as second-time adopters, third-time adopters, and we do training with them in stage 2 because it's like a slightly different lens. What does it mean to grow your family with a child who's been adopted already? And we look at it and we bring back the virtual reality. And there's that we remember doing it. So there's the stickability factor that they remember doing it the first time, but then seeing it through the lens of having adopted and understanding their child and the trauma, it kind of then brings it back for people. And we consistently see from, our second time adopters going, we started off brilliant in terms of our approaches, then it's slipped a little bit, and now we're like, oh, okay, this is why this is happening, and just refreshing for them. So yeah, I'm sure for you guys in adoption support, for us, like, we see it as well in terms of that coming back and revisiting it and the power that that brings. I definitely find as like a facilitator when we're doing it with families where children have been placed, there's an extra level of duty of care that needs to go into place. Everything for a lot of our prospective adopters is hypothetical. And then once it's becomes actually this has got connections to our child, we need to kind of then scaffold that.
On another note, one piece of work that one of my social workers did recently was with an older birth sibling, who was struggling with the challenges that their younger sibling was bringing into the home. And that was really valuable for them to just open their eye. It wasn't that they didn't understand, it was just that they just needed that extra bit of information about why their sibling was doing what they were doing and what that really meant. And actually, my social worker found that this older birth child was actually more open to thinking about that than the parents at that stage, and that it was a really, really valuable piece of work to do. So the scope for supporting people is beyond parents as well. It's for the wider family and schools as well. I've done lots of work with schools in the past and really shifted the position of schools around how they implement discipline in the school, how they think about a child, how they, it helps them to adjust their expectations, to think about how they can bring the rest of the class into something with that child so that that child feels part of something, but it's also trauma informed. So the power of the VR is everywhere, isn't it? In a child's network, like it can be used in so many diverse ways with all those different systems that the child lives within, really.